The ship came out of the darkness like a wounded bird falling from the sky. Captain Elena Vance stood on the bridge of the UEN Prometheus and watched the alien vessel tumble through space. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. The hull was made of something that looked like pearl and copper, twisted together. But great holes had been torn through it. Fires burned in places where there should have been no air to feed them. The ship was dying. And it was dying fast. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station, "I am reading life signs. Faint, but they are there. At least 40 of them." Elena did not hesitate. "Bring us alongside. Prepare boarding teams with full medical support. Ma'am, we do not know what is on that ship. Protocol says we should wait for..." Clued. "Protocol did not see those life signs, Lieutenant." "I did. Move us in." The Prometheus was a destroyer, built for war. But today it would be a rescue ship. Elena watched as her crew worked with the speed and skill that came from years of training. Within 20 minutes, they had matched speed with the alien vessel. Within 30, the first boarding team was cutting through the hull. What they found inside changed everything. The aliens were tall and thin, with bodies like insects but faces that held something close to human expression. They had 4 arms and 2 legs. Their skin was a deep blue that shifted to purple in certain light, and they were terrified. Not of the humans who had come to save them. They were terrified of something else. Something that was not there. The leader of the aliens was old. Elena could tell by the way the others looked at him, by the slow and careful way he moved. His name, she would learn later, was Sithrix. He was what his people called an elder, and he had lived for over 300 years. When Elena entered the medical bay where the survivors had been taken, Sithrix was sitting up on a bed. His 4 arms were wrapped around his body like he was trying to hold himself together. His eyes, large and dark, and filled with intelligence, found hers immediately. "You are the leader," he said. His voice was rough, but the translation device the humans had given him worked well enough. "You command this vessel. I am Captain Elena Vance. You are safe now. Whatever was chasing you, I am CHO-1. Nothing was chasing us." Sithrix made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no joy in it. "We were running from a place. A region of space your maps do not show. A place where my people lived for 10,000 years before the silence came." Elena sat down across from him. Around them, medical staff moved between beds, treating burns and broken bones and wounds that looked like they had been made by claws. "Tell me," she said. And Sithrix told her. The galaxy, he explained, was not empty. It was full of life. Thousands of species had spread across millions of worlds, building civilizations that had lasted longer than humanity had existed. They called their union the Dominion. It was not an empire built on conquest. It was a coalition built on survival. Because the galaxy was old, and in its oldest places, there were things that did not welcome the living. "The null zones," Sithrix said. The words seemed to cause him physical pain. "They are marked on every star chart in every language. Red zones. Forbidden zones. Places where ships go and never return. Places where entire civilizations have vanished overnight." "What is in them?" Elena asked. "We do not know. We have never known. All we know is that those who enter feel fear, unlike anything the mind can survive. They feel it so strongly that their hearts stop. Their minds break. They die screaming, or they die silent, but they die. Always." Elena leaned forward. "Your people lived near one of these zones?" "We lived inside one. For 10,000 years, we thought we were safe. We thought the boundary had settled. We were wrong." Sithrix's voice dropped to a whisper. 3 months ago, the zone expanded. It swallowed our colonies one by one. Billions of my people. Gone. Not killed by weapons or disease. Killed by fear itself. The room was quiet. Elena could hear the hum of the ship around her, the soft beeping of medical equipment, the distant sounds of her crew going about their work. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. But Sithrix's words had put a crack in that safety. "How did you survive?" she asked. "We ran. We ran faster than we have ever run. And we did not look back." He met her eyes. "You do not understand yet, Captain. You are young. Your species is young. You have not learned what the rest of the galaxy knows. What do we not know? That fear is not something you feel. Fear is something that kills. And when the Dominion learns that you exist, they will come to warn you. They will come to teach you. They will come to teach you. And you will learn, as all species learn, that there are places in this universe where nothing that thinks can survive." Elena stood up. She was not sure what to say. The idea was too big, too strange. A galaxy full of life. Forbidden zones where fear itself was a weapon. Ancient civilizations that had died screaming. "Rest now," she said. "You are safe on my ship." Sithrix shook his head slowly. "Safe is a word I no longer understand. But I thank you for the kindness." 2 weeks later, the Dominion arrived. Elena had sent her report to Earth Command. She had expected questions, doubt, maybe even accusations that she had lost her mind. Instead, she had received a single message. "Hold position. Diplomatic fleet. Inbound." She had not expected the diplomatic fleet to come from outside human space. The Dominion ships were massive. The largest was over 30 kilometers long, a mountain of crystal and metal that seemed to glow from within. Beside it, the Prometheus looked like a toy boat next to a cargo ship. "They are hailing us," Torres said. His voice was steady, but Elena could see the sweat on his forehead. "Put them through." The screen filled with an image that made Elena's breath catch. The being that looked back at her was made of crystal. Not decorated with crystal, or wearing crystal armor. Made of it. Its body was humanoid in shape, but its face was a collection of geometric planes that shifted and moved as it spoke. Light pulsed through it in patterns that might have been thoughts or emotions or something humans had no word for. "I am Archon Vethkal," the being said. Its voice was like wind chimes in a storm. "I speak for the Dominion High Council. We have received your transmission about the Velkari refugees. They are under my protection," Elena said. She was surprised by how calm her voice sounded. "We do not wish to harm them. We wish to help them. And we wish to speak with your species." The Archon paused. "You are new. You are unknown. The Dominion has watched your expansion with interest. We believe the time has come to make formal contact." And so it began. Over the next year, humanity learned about the galaxy. They learned about the 4,000 species of the Dominion, the millions of worlds, the technologies that could reshape stars and build structures larger than planets. They learned about the trade routes and the political alliances and the ancient treaties that held everything together. And they learned about the null zones. Every species had stories about them. Every civilization had lost something to them. The zones were scattered across the galaxy like wounds that would not heal. Some were small, just a few star systems. Others were vast, spanning entire sectors. The largest, the one the Velkari had fled, was called the Great Silence. It covered a region of space that could have held 100 human civilizations. No one knew what was inside. No one who had entered had ever returned sane enough to explain. The Dominion's greatest warships, crewed by its bravest warriors, had tried for thousands of years to explore them. Every expedition ended the same way. The ships either never came back, or they came back filled with corpses. Crew members dead in their seats. No wounds, no damage, no sign of attack. Just faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. "It is the fear," Sithrix explained to Elena during one of their many conversations. He had become something like an advisor to her, helping her understand the galaxy she was now a part of. That is what we call it. Not a creature, not a weapon, just fear, so pure and so powerful that the mind cannot survive it. And no one has ever figured out what causes it? Many have tried. All have failed. The fear does not negotiate. It does not explain. It simply is. The Dominion offered humanity a choice. They could join the coalition and accept its protections and responsibilities, or they could remain independent, outside the structures that governed galactic civilization. There was no threat, no pressure, just an option. Humanity spent a year debating. There were those who wanted nothing to do with alien politics. There were those who saw opportunity. There were those who were afraid, and those who were curious, and those who simply wanted to be left alone. In the end, the vote was close. 53% in favor of joining. And so humanity became the 4,001st species of the Dominion. But membership came with a requirement. Every new species had to prove their worth. They called it the right of contribution. Humanity had to offer something that no other species could provide. It could be technology, or art, or philosophy, or science. It could be a service, or a skill, or a new way of thinking. Ambassador David Chen was tasked with finding humanity's contribution. He was a small man with tired eyes and a mind that never stopped working. He had been a diplomat for 30 years, and he had thought he understood negotiation. The Dominion taught him how little he knew. For months, he studied the other species. He learned what they valued, what they needed, what they lacked. And slowly, a picture began to form. The Dominion was powerful. The Dominion was ancient. The Dominion had technologies that humanity could not even begin to understand. But the Dominion was also afraid. Not of enemies or disasters or war. They were afraid of the null zones. They were afraid of the fear. And that fear had shaped everything about them. Chen requested a meeting with Archon Vethkal. The crystal being received him in a chamber that seemed to be carved from a single diamond. "You have a proposal," the Archon said. It was not a question. "I have a question first." Chen folded his hands in his lap. In all the time the Dominion has existed, has any species ever tried to clear a null zone? The light inside the Archon flickered. Many have tried. All have failed. And the failures, they were caused by fear? The crews could not handle what they felt inside the zones? No, that is correct. Chen nodded slowly. Then I have a proposal. Humanity would like to attempt what others have failed to do. We would like to enter a null zone and find out what is inside. The silence that followed was long enough to make Chen wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. Then the Archon spoke. "You do not understand what you are offering. The fear is not something you can fight. It is not something you can prepare for. It is absolute. It breaks every mind that encounters it." "With respect," Chen said, "you do not know if it will break ours. Every species believes they are different. Every species learns they are not. We are, perhaps. But humanity has a long history with fear, Archon. We have lived with it since we came down from the trees. We have fought wars, faced plagues, survived disasters that should have destroyed us. And through all of it, we kept going. Not because we were not afraid, because we were afraid, and we refused to stop." The Archon was silent for a long moment. Then it made a sound that might have been a sigh, or might have been something else entirely. "You are either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both," Chen smiled. "But we would like the chance to find out which." The Archon rose from its seat. Its crystalline body caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 rainbows. "I will take your proposal to the Council, but I will tell you now what they will say. They will say yes. Not because they believe you will succeed, but because they have watched your species, Ambassador. They have seen how you fight, how you struggle, how you refuse to yield, even when all logic says you should. and they are curious. Curious about what? About what happens when fear meets something it cannot break. The Archon moved toward the door. Rest well, Ambassador. Whatever comes next, your species has already proven something valuable. What is that? The Archon paused at the threshold. That you are willing to walk into the dark. That alone is more than most species will ever do. And with that, the Archon was gone, leaving Chen alone in the diamond chamber with the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright. And somewhere in the darkness between them, the null zones waited. Silent, patient, hungry, humanity was coming. And for the first time in 11,000 years, something in the darkness might have reason to worry. 5 years had passed since humanity joined the Dominion. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka stood at the observation window of the research station Kethvor and watched the stars spin slowly past. She had been stationed here for 8 months, serving as a liaison officer between the human scientific teams and the Dominion researchers. It was supposed to be a quiet posting, a chance to learn about alien science and build connections. Nothing dangerous, nothing exciting. She had been wrong about that. The station orbited a gas giant at the edge of known space. Beyond it, visible only as a darkness where stars should have been, lay the boundary of a null zone. The researchers here studied that boundary. They measured it. They watched for changes. They tried to understand what made the zones expand and contract. They never went inside. That was the rule. The most important rule. Yuki had spent her months here learning everything she could about the Dominion species. She had worked alongside the Velkari, with their 4 arms and their careful movements. She had spoken with the Archons, those crystal beings who seemed to know everything and explain nothing. She had shared meals with the Tereshi, a species that looked like walking trees and spoke in voices like rustling leaves. And she had noticed something strange. It started as a small thing. During an emergency drill, a coolant pipe had burst in one of the lower levels. Nothing serious, just a maintenance issue. But the response of her alien colleagues had surprised her. They had not simply moved away from the danger. They had frozen. Their bodies had locked up. Their eyes had gone wide and blank. For almost a full minute, they had stood there like statues while the coolant sprayed across the floor. Yuki had been the one to shut off the valve. She had been the one to call for cleanup. And afterward, she had been the one to sit with a young Velkari technician who could not stop shaking. "I do not understand," the technician had said. "My body would not move. I told it to move, but it would not listen." "That is fear," Yuki had said. "It happens to everyone. But you moved. You were not frozen." Yuki had not known what to say to that. She had been afraid. The hissing of the coolant, the alarm sounds, the chaos, all of it, had made her heart race and her hands shake. But she had moved anyway. She had not even thought about it. You saw a problem, you fixed it. That was how she had been raised. After that incident, she started paying attention. And the more she watched, the more she understood. The Dominion species were not like humans. They looked different, of course, with their various shapes and sizes and colors, but the difference went deeper than that. The difference was in their bones, in their blood, in the very structure of their minds. They had all evolved as prey. Yuki discovered this during a late-night conversation with Dr. Seleth, a Tereshi biologist who had been studying comparative evolution for centuries. "It is the great commonality," Seleth had explained. His voice rustled like wind through autumn leaves. "Every species in the Dominion evolved on worlds where they were hunted. We developed intelligence not to hunt, but to hide. Not to chase, but to flee. Our ancestors survived because they were afraid. Fear kept them alive." 2-3. "But humans evolved as hunters," Yuki said. "We were predators." "Yes. We have studied your evolutionary history with great interest. It is unusual. Your ancestors were prey once. Small creatures hiding from larger ones. But somewhere along the way, you changed. You became hunters. You learned to chase instead of flee. You learned to face danger instead of running from it. Does that matter? Selith's bark-like face shifted into what might have been a smile. When a Dominion species feels fear, their bodies react in ancient ways. They freeze. They hide. They wait for the danger to pass. This response is not a choice. It is built into our nervous systems at the deepest level. And humans feel fear. But your response is different. You do not freeze. You fight. Or you run. But you act. You move through the fear instead of being trapped by it. Yuki thought about this for a long time after that conversation. She thought about all the times she had been afraid in her life. The car accident when she was 17. The first time, she went into space. The emergency on her first ship when the hull had been breached and 3 of her friends had died. She had been terrified every time, but she had kept moving. She had done what needed to be done. She had never realized that this was special. She had always assumed everyone was the same. The alarm came on a Tuesday. Yuki was in the mess hall eating breakfast when the station shook. The lights flickered. A sound like tearing metal echoed through the corridors. And then the announcement came, in that calm, automated voice that somehow made everything worse. Attention all personnel. The null zone boundary has shifted. Repeat. The boundary has shifted. All sections prepare for immediate evacuation. Yuki was on her feet before the announcement finished. Around her, the Dominion researchers were frozen. Some had dropped their food. Some were sitting perfectly still, their eyes wide and empty. The fear response had taken them, as it always did. She did not waste time trying to shake them out of it. She ran for the command center. The scene there was chaos. Or rather, it was the opposite of chaos. It was stillness. A dozen Dominion officers stood at their stations like statues. Only a few were moving, and their movements were slow and clumsy, like they were fighting through deep water. Report, Yuki said, grabbing the shoulder of the nearest officer, an Archon whose crystal body had gone dark. The zone, the Archon whispered. It expanded. Sections 7 through 12 are inside the boundary now. We have lost contact. Yuki pulled up the station schematic on the nearest screen. Her heart dropped. Sections 7 through 12. The engineering levels. The power core. And 17 human engineers who had been doing maintenance down there. We need to evacuate those sections, she said. We cannot. The Archon's voice was barely audible. The boundary. Nothing can enter and return. Protocol is to retreat. To save what can be saved. There are people down there. They are lost. Protocol is clear. We do not enter the zones. Ever. Yuki stared at the schematic. The boundary was marked in red, a line that cut through the station like a wound. On one side, safety. On the other side, the unknown. The feared. The silence. The feared. The silence. She activated her communicator. Yuki to UEN Relentless. Do you read? The response came through static, but she could hear the voice of Captain Marcus Webb underneath it. Relentless here. We see the situation, Commander. The fleet is preparing to evacuate the station. Captain, we have 17 of our people trapped beyond the boundary. A pause. Then, I see them on sensors. Life signs are still strong. Then we have to get them out. Another pause. Longer this time. Yuki could imagine Webb on his bridge, staring at the same data she was looking at, doing the same math. The Dominion fleet was already pulling back. Protocol demanded it. No one entered the null zones. No one. Commander, Webb said finally. Gather any human personnel who can move and meet me at Docking Bay 4. The Relentless is going in. The Dominion tried to stop them. Archon Vethkal appeared on the Relentless's bridge as the ship broke away from the station. His crystal form blazed with light. Captain Webb, you must not do this. The null zone is death. Your crew will be killed. Maybe, Webb said. He was a tall man, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had been a captain for 20 years. He had lost ships and crews and friends. He knew what death looked like. But those are my people in there. I am not leaving them. You do not understand. The fear is not something you can fight. It will break your minds. Your crew will die screaming. Then we will die screaming. But we will die trying. Webb turned to his helmsman. Take us in. The Relentless crossed the boundary at full speed. The first thing Yuki noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound. The ship's engines still hummed. The instruments still beeped. But something deeper. A silence in her chest. A silence in her thoughts. Like something was listening. Then the fear came. It started small. A tightness in her stomach. A chill on her skin. The feeling that something was watching from the shadows. Normal fear. The kind she had felt 1,000 times before. But it grew. It built. It pressed against her mind like a hand pressing against a door, trying to force its way in. Around her, she saw her crewmates struggling. Some gripped their consoles with white knuckles. Some closed their eyes and whispered prayers or curses or words that meant nothing. Some just stood there, breathing hard, their faces pale. But they were moving. They were working. They were not frozen. I am getting readings, the sensor officer said. His voice shook, but his hands were steady on his console. 17 life signs, concentrated in Section 9. They are alive. Take us in, Webb said. The fear grew stronger. Yuki saw things at the edge of her vision. Shapes that were not there. Faces that dissolved when she looked at them directly. She heard whispers in languages she did not know. She felt hands on her shoulders, cold and thin, and when she spun around, there was nothing there. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. Every instinct told her to run, to hide, to get out of this place where nothing made sense and everything was wrong. But she stayed at her station. She did her job. Because that was what humans did. It took 3 hours to reach Section 9. 3 hours of growing fear, of whispers and shadows, and the feeling of something vast and ancient pressing against the walls of the ship. 2 crew members had to be sedated when the fear became too much. One had tried to open an airlock. Another had simply curled up on the floor and refused to move. But the rest kept going. They found the engineers huddled in a storage room. Some were crying. Some were laughing in that way people laugh when they have nothing left. But they were alive. All 17 of them. I do not know how you found us, said the chief engineer. A woman named Petrova, whose face was streaked with tears and soot. We thought we were dead. We thought no one would come. We are human, Yuki said. We always come. The return trip was worse than the journey in. The fear had learned them now. It knew what they were afraid of. It threw images at them. Memories. Nightmares made real. Yuki saw her mother dying again. The cancer taking her piece by piece. She saw her first commander. The woman who had taught her everything. Floating dead in the vacuum of space. She saw herself alone. Forgotten. Abandoned in the dark. But she kept moving. She kept working. She helped guide the ship out of the darkness and back into the light. When the Relentless emerged from the null zone, the Dominion fleet was waiting. Thousands of sensors turned toward them. Thousands of alien eyes watched as the battered destroyer limped out of the impossible. Captain Webb's voice was rough when he made his report. Relentless to Fleet Command. We have recovered all 17 personnel, returning to station for medical evaluation. The silence that followed stretched for a long moment. Then, Archon Vethkal's voice came through. And for the first time since Yuki had known him, the crystal being sounded uncertain. Captain Webb, how did you survive? Webb looked around his bridge, at the exhausted faces of his crew, at the engineers they had rescued, some still trembling, some already asleep from the relief of being alive, at Yuki, who met his eyes and gave him a small nod. We were scared, Webb said. We just did not stop. 3 weeks later, the summons came from the Dominion High Council. The chamber was the largest Yuki had ever seen. It was carved from black stone that seemed to absorb light. 12 thrones sat in a circle, and on each throne sat a representative of the 12 oldest species in the galaxy. They had ruled the Dominion for longer than humanity had existed. They had seen civilizations rise and fall. They had watched stars die. And now they were watching the humans. Ambassador David Chen stood in the center of the circle. Yuki and Captain Webb stood behind him. Around them, floating screens showed footage from the Relentless's sensors. The journey into the null zone. The fear readings that had spiked off every chart. The successful rescue. The eldest counselor spoke first. It was called the Umbrax, and it was made of living shadow. It had no face, no features, only a darkness that was deeper than the darkness around it. "We have watched your species since you joined us," the Umbrax said. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "We have observed your ways, your wars, your struggles, your refusal to surrender, even when all hope is lost. We are a stubborn species," Chen said. "You are more than stubborn." The Umbrax leaned forward, though it had nothing to lean forward with. "We have seen your crew enter a null zone and emerge alive. We have analyzed the recordings. You felt the fear. We can see it in your vital signs, your brain activity, your chemical responses. You felt it just as strongly as any Dominion species would. We did, but you did not freeze. You did not break. You kept moving. You kept functioning. You completed your mission." The Umbrax paused. "You are mine. In 11,000 years, no species has ever done this." The chamber was silent. Yuki could feel the weight of ancient eyes upon them. The counselors were not hostile, she realized. They were something stranger. They were hopeful, and they were afraid of that hope. "There is a world," the Umbrax said finally. "In the deepest null zone, at the very heart of the Great Silence. It is called Vexaris 7. 11,000 years ago, it was home to one of our greatest civilizations. Then, the silence came, and they were lost. Billions of lives vanished. We have never returned. You want us to go there?" Chen said. "It was not a question. We want to know if you can. We want to know if your species is truly what you appear to be. A people who can walk where fear cannot reach." The Umbrax rose from its throne. "We are not asking you to do this. We are offering you the chance. If humanity can clear Vexaris 7, if you can discover what haunts that world and end it, you will have done what no species in galactic history has ever accomplished." Chen looked back at Webb and Yuki. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were tired. They had already walked through the darkness once, but they nodded. Chen turned back to the council. "We will need time to prepare. Ships, volunteers, resources. You will have everything you need," the Umbrax said. "But remember, Ambassador, the fear is patient. It has waited 11,000 years. It will wait a little longer. Thanks for watching. Their contact some other. You will have everything you need," the Umbrax said. "It has waited 11,000 years." Chen nodded. "Then, we had better not keep it waiting." "No." He turned and walked out of the chamber. Webb and Yuki followed. Behind them, the oldest beings in the galaxy watched them go, and somewhere, in the darkness between the stars, something ancient stirred. Something that had never known defeat. Something that had broken every mind that had ever challenged it. It felt the humans coming, and for the first time in a very long time, it felt something new. It felt uncertain. The first expeditionary fleet assembled at the edge of darkness. 12 ships hung in the void, their lights small against the endless black. The flagship was the UEN Perseverance, a heavy cruiser that had been modified for long-range exploration. Around it, destroyers and support vessels formed a loose formation. 4,000 souls in total. All of them volunteers. All of them knowing they might never come back. Fleet Admiral Amara Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and looked at the wall of nothing before them. The null zone did not look like anything. It was simply an absence. Stars should have been there, but they were not. Light should have been there, but it was not. There was only black. Deeper than any black she had ever seen. She was 63 years old. She had commanded ships in 2 wars, lost friends and crew members, made decisions that haunted her still. She had thought she understood what it meant to be afraid. Looking at that wall of darkness, she realized she was still learning. Admiral. Her executive officer, Commander James Liu, approached with a datapad. All ships report ready. The Dominion Observation Fleet is holding position at the boundary. Observation Fleet. Okonkwo smiled without humor. They came to watch us die. Some of them, maybe. But I spoke with Archon Vethkal before we launched. He said something interesting. Mar. Ness. Mar. Ness. Ness. What? Liu glanced at the datapad, then back at her. He said that, in 11,000 years, he has never wanted anything to be true as much as he wants us to succeed. He said that if we could do this, it would change everything the Dominion believes about itself. Okonkwo nodded slowly. The weight of that hope was heavier than she had expected. It was one thing to risk your life for your own people. It was another thing to carry the dreams of an entire galaxy. Assemble the fleet commanders on the main channel, she said. It is time. The faces of her captains appeared on screens around the bridge. Yuki Tanaka, now promoted to captain and commanding the destroyer, Relentless. Marcus Webb, who had refused to retire and now captained the support vessel Horizon. Others she had chosen personally, men and women who had proven themselves in the small moments that mattered. You all know why we are here, Okonkwo said. The Dominion has asked us to do what no one else can do, to enter the Great Silence and find out what killed a civilization 11,000 years ago. She paused. I will not lie to you. Many of us will not come back. The fear that lives in that place has broken every mind that has ever faced it. Every species that has tried what we are about to try has failed. Be good. She looked at each face in turn. Tired faces, determined faces, afraid faces, but none of them looking away. But we are not every species. We are human. We have always lived with fear. We have carried it with us, since the first of us looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Fear has been our companion, our enemy, our teacher. She straightened her shoulders. The galaxy is watching us today. Some of them think we are fools. Some of them think we are already dead. But some of them are hoping that maybe, just maybe, the darkness is not as strong as they have always believed. She raised her hand. All ships, prepare for transition. We are going into the silence. The jump was instantaneous, as jumps always were. One moment, they were in normal space, surrounded by stars and light and the distant glow of the Dominion fleet. The next moment, they were somewhere else. Okonkwo had expected the darkness. She had expected the silence. She had even expected the fear. That cold pressure against her mind that had been described in every briefing and report. She had not expected the wrongness. It was not something she could see or hear or touch. It was something deeper than that. The universe itself felt different here. Wrong. Broken. Like a song with a note missing, or a face with features in the wrong places. Her mind kept trying to make sense of it, and kept failing. Admiral, Liu's voice was tight. Sensors are. I do not know how to describe it. The readings do not match anything in our database. Keep monitoring. Record everything. Okonkwo gripped the arm of her command chair. Navigation. Plot a course for Vexeris 7. Course plotted. Estimated time to arrival. 43 hours. 43 hours. Okonkwo had read the historical records. The longest anyone had survived in a null zone was 12 hours. Most did not last more than 3. All hands, this is the Admiral. We are now inside the Great Silence. All personnel are to report any unusual experiences immediately. Stay with your shipmates. Do not go anywhere alone. And remember, fear is just a feeling. It cannot hurt you unless you let it. She did not know if that last part was true. But it was what her people needed to hear. The first hours were quiet. The fleet moved through the void at a steady pace. Sensors scanning, crews working. The wrongness persisted. That constant feeling that something was not right. But nothing happened. No attacks. No strange phenomena. Just darkness and silence, and the slow crawl of ships through empty space. Then the whispers began. It started in the medical bay of the Relentless. A nurse named Garcia reported hearing voices in the corridor outside. When she went to investigate, there was no one there. But the voices continued. Soft. Distant. Speaking in languages she did not recognize. Within an hour, reports were coming in from every ship. Whispers. Shadows. Movement at the edge of vision that disappeared when you turned to look. Nothing dangerous. Nothing physical. Just the constant, creeping sensation of being watched by something vast and patient. Dr. Samuel Reyes, the fleet psychologist, worked around the clock. He moved from ship to ship, speaking with crew members, documenting their experiences. It is probing us, he said during a briefing with the senior officers. Testing our fear responses. Looking for weaknesses. What do you recommend? Okonkwo asked. Keep people busy. Give them tasks, routines, things to focus on. Fear grows in empty space. The more we fill that space with purpose, the harder it will be for whatever is out there to get inside our heads. They followed his advice. The ships hummed with activity. People worked double shifts, not because they had to, but because it was better than sitting alone with their thoughts. They played cards. They told stories. They sang songs that their grandparents had taught them. Old songs from a world far away that somehow seemed important now. But the fear was patient, and it was learning. On the second day, the nightmares began. Okonkwo woke from a dream of drowning. Not in water, but in darkness. A darkness that was alive, that pressed against her eyes and filled her lungs and whispered that she was small and weak and would die alone and forgotten. She sat up in her bunk, heart pounding, and found Liu standing in her doorway. You too? She asked. He nodded. His face was pale, his eyes red. The same dream. Drowning in the dark. I thought it was just me. But then the reports started coming in. Every crew member on every ship had experienced the same nightmare. The exact same one. Thousands of people, dreaming the same dream at the same moment. It knows we are here, Okonkwo said. It has known since we crossed the boundary. This is just it, saying hello. They pushed on. What else could they do? On the third day, they found the first sign of what had happened to the civilization that once lived here. It was a ship, or what was left of one. A massive vessel, far larger than anything in the human fleet, drifting dead in the void. Its hull was intact. Its systems showed no damage. But when a boarding team entered, they found the crew still at their stations, 10,000 years dead. Their bodies preserved by the cold of space. Their faces frozen in expressions of terror so absolute that several members of the boarding team had to be sedated afterward. They died of fear, Dr. Reyes said. His voice was quiet as he reviewed the data. Their hearts stopped. Their brains shut down. Whatever they saw, whatever they felt, it was too much for their minds to process. Could it happen to us? Okonkwo asked. Reyes was silent for a long moment. I do not know. The Dominion species have a specific response to extreme fear. Their nervous systems literally shut down to protect them, but sometimes the shutdown is too complete. The heart forgets to beat. The lungs forget to breathe. And humans? Humans are different. Our fear response is more complex. We can panic, we can freeze, but we can also fight. We can push through. He met her eyes. But Admiral, I have never seen fear like what killed these people. Whatever is out there, it is not just trying to scare us. It is trying to break us. They reached Vexorus 7 on the 4th day. The planet was beautiful. Even through the wrongness, even through the fear, Okonkwo could see that. It was a world of blue oceans and green continents, of mountain ranges and river systems and cities that spread across the land like glittering webs, cities that were completely silent, cities that had not seen a living soul in 11,000 years. Taking up orbit, the navigation officer reported. I am detecting no active systems on the surface. No power signatures. No communications. Nothing. What about life signs? None, Admiral. The planet is dead. Okonkwo looked at the world below. Billions of people had lived there once. They had built a civilization that spanned continents. They had created art, and music, and science, and culture, and then the fear had come, and all of it had ended in a single night. We need to go down there, she said. Admiral, with respect, we do not know what is waiting for us. Liu's voice was careful. The fear is stronger here. Everyone can feel it. If we send people to the surface, then they might not come back. I know. Okonkwo stood up. But we did not come all this way to sit in orbit. Somewhere on that planet is the answer to what happened here. The answer to what the fear really is. And we are going to find it. She activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships. This is Admiral Okonkwo. We have reached Vexorus 7. I am calling for volunteers for a surface expedition. I will not order anyone to go. You all know the risks. But if we want to end this, if we want to give the galaxy something to hope for, we need to go down there. She paused. If you are willing to walk into the dark, report to the shuttle bay. If you are not, no one will judge you. Fear is real. Fear is powerful. But it is not the end of the story. Not unless we let it be. She ended the transmission and waited. The reports came in slowly at first. Then, faster. Then, faster still. From every ship in the fleet, volunteers stepped forward. Not everyone. Some could not do it, could not face the thought of going down to that silent world. But hundreds could. Hundreds did. Sergeant Rosa Delgado was one of them. She was 34 years old, born in Mexico City, raised on stories of her grandmother who had survived a revolution and her grandfather who had walked across a desert to build a better life. She had joined the military because she wanted to protect people. She had volunteered for this mission because she was tired of being afraid. The shuttle dropped through the atmosphere like a stone falling into a well. Below them, the capital city of Vexorus spread out in all directions. Towers of silver and gold, streets paved with something that looked like white marble. Parks and plazas and monuments to heroes no one remembered anymore. And everywhere, the bodies. They lay where they had fallen 11,000 years ago, in the streets, in the doorways, on benches and in vehicles, and at their workstations. Millions of them, preserved by some quirk of the atmosphere, their faces still showing what they had felt in their final moments. Terror. Absolute and overwhelming terror. Delgado stepped off the shuttle and onto the white marble streets. The fear was immediate and crushing. It was not like anything she had felt before. It was not like being afraid of dying or being hurt or losing someone. It was fear itself, pure and distilled, pressing against her mind like a weight that wanted to crush her into nothing. Her legs shook. Her hands trembled. Her heart beat so fast she thought it might burst. Every part of her body screamed at her to run, to hide, to get away from this place where death waited in every shadow. But she did not run. She raised her rifle. She checked her equipment. She looked at the soldiers around her. Their faces pale, their eyes wide, but their bodies moving, their feet stepping forward. "Move out," said Lieutenant Park, the team leader. His voice shook, but his words were clear. "We need to reach the central spire. That is where the archives are. If there are answers, they will be there." They walked through the dead city. The fear walked with them. It was stronger now, more focused. It had found them. It knew what they were, and it was trying everything it could to make them stop. Delgado saw her mother dying. Not a memory, a vision, playing out in front of her like a movie. She saw her brother getting the diagnosis that would kill him. She saw her own funeral, saw her friends crying over an empty coffin. She kept walking. Private Chen saw his daughter, the one who had died in a car accident 3 years ago. He saw her standing in the street, reaching for him, asking why he had not saved her. He kept walking. Lieutenant Park saw himself alone in the dark, forgotten by everyone, slowly losing his mind to something he could not see or fight or understand. He kept walking. They all kept walking. "I have been scared my whole life," Delgado said. She did not know who she was talking to, the fear. Herself. The dead city around them. "My grandmother was scared when she fled the soldiers. My grandfather was scared when he crossed the desert. But they did not stop. They kept going. And I am their granddaughter." She raised her rifle at the shadows that swirled around them. "You are going to have to do better than that." They reached the central spire as the sun was setting. The building was massive, a tower of crystal that rose from the city's heart like a needle pointing at the sky. Inside, they found the archives records of a civilization that had thrived for millennia before the silence came. And they found something else. It was in the deepest level of the spire, in a chamber that had been sealed for 11,000 years. A structure of impossible angles, made of a material that hurt to look at, and within that structure, a presence, not alive, not dead, something else, entirely. "What is that?" Park whispered. Delgado studied the structure with her sensors. The readings were incomprehensible, but she understood enough. "I think," she said slowly, "that is what we came here to find." The presence stirred. The fear intensified, pressing against them with renewed force. And for the first time, it spoke, not in words, in feelings, images, a flood of terror and despair and hopelessness that crashed against their minds like waves against a shore. But waves break on rock, and humans were very, very good at being rocks. Delgado stood her ground. The others stood with her. And in that moment, in that sealed chamber, at the heart of a dead world, something changed. The fear had never encountered anything like them, and it did not know what to do. The team returned to the fleet with news that changed everything. Admiral Okonkwo listened to Sergeant Delgado's report in the Perseverance's briefing room. The recording from the central spire played on the screen behind them, that structure of impossible angles, that presence that radiated fear like a star radiates light. "It is not alive," Delgado said. "Not in any way we understand. Dr. Reyes thinks it is some kind of machine. A weapon. A weapon," Okonkwo repeated. "Built by someone, a long time ago. Before the Dominion, before any of the current civilizations. Someone created it to do exactly what it does. To generate fear. To broadcast it across space. To kill anything that thinks by overloading their minds with terror. Why would anyone build something like that?" Delgado shook her head. "We do not know. The archives on Vexorus had fragments of information. A war? Maybe? Someone wanted a weapon that could defeat any enemy, no matter how strong, and they succeeded." Dr. Reyes stepped forward. He had spent the last 12 hours analyzing the data from the surface mission. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his voice was steady. The weapon is located in the planet's core. The structure in the spire is just an access point, a doorway. The real source of the fear is buried deep underground. And it is still active. It has been active for 11,000 years, broadcasting terror across this entire region of space. Can it be stopped? Theoretically, yes. The archives included partial schematics. There is a shutdown mechanism, a fail-safe that the original builders included. Reyes paused. But to reach it, we would have to go through the dead cities, through the access tunnels, through everything the weapon can throw at us. And the closer we get to the core, the stronger the fear will become. Okonkwo looked at the faces around the table. Captain Tanaka, Captain Webb, the other commanders who had led their ships through the darkness. They were tired. They were scared. They had already done more than anyone had thought possible. I am not going to order anyone to do this, she said. You have already proven what humans can do. If we leave now, if we go back and tell the Dominion what we found, that alone would be more than any other species has accomplished. But the weapon would still be active, Tanaka said quietly. Yes, and the null zone would still be here. And in another 1,000 years, or 10,000, it might expand again, swallow more worlds, kill more people. Yes, Tanaka looked at her fellow commanders. Something passed between them, unspoken. A decision made, without words. Then we finish it, she said. We did not come this far to leave the job half done. The descent began the next morning. Admiral Okonkwo led the final team herself. She had considered staying with the fleet, coordinating from orbit. But this was not a mission for coordination. This was a mission for walking into the dark, and she would not ask her people to go where she was not willing to go herself. They landed at the edge of the capital city. 100 volunteers. The best soldiers, scientists, and engineers the fleet had to offer, each of them carrying weapons, equipment, and a shutdown device that Reyes and his team had built based on the archive schematics. The access tunnel is on the other side of the city, Okonkwo said. We move fast, we move together, and we do not stop. Whatever we see, whatever we feel, we keep moving. Is that understood? 100 voices answered as one. Yes, Admiral. They entered the dead city. The fear was waiting for them. It started with the whispers, as it always did. Voices calling from empty buildings. Names of loved ones spoken by throats that had no breath. Then came the visions. Memories twisted into nightmares. Hopes transformed into despair. Private Torres saw his wife leaving him. Not a memory, it had never happened, but it felt real. The door closing. The car pulling away. The silence of an empty house. He kept walking. Corporal Yamamoto saw her daughter lying in a hospital bed. Machines beeping. Doctors shaking their heads. She kept walking. Dr. Reyes saw himself going mad. Saw his own hands writing nonsense on walls. His own voice screaming words without meaning. He kept walking. The fear pressed harder. It had never encountered resistance like this. Every species it had touched had broken within minutes. Their minds had simply stopped, overwhelmed by terror too great to process. But these humans, these strange, stubborn creatures, they felt the fear and they moved through it. So, the fear changed tactics. Admiral. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was soft, gentle, almost kind. You do not have to do this. Okonkwo raised her hand, signaling the team to halt. Around them, the dead city seemed to lean closer, listening. You are afraid, the voice continued. I can feel it. The racing of your heart, the trembling of your hands, the thoughts you cannot control, the images you cannot stop seeing. Yes, Okonkwo said. I am afraid. Then why do you continue? Why walk toward pain when you could walk away? I am offering you peace, an end to fear, an end to struggle. All you have to do is stop. Okonkwo looked at her team, at the pale faces and shaking hands. at the tears that some of them could not hold back, at the terror in their eyes, and at the way they were still standing, still waiting, still ready to follow her into the dark. "You do not understand us," she said. "You see our fear, but you do not see what is behind it." Judgment. 2. There is nothing behind it. Fear is the foundation. Fear is the truth. Everything else is illusion. No. Okonkwo started walking again. Fear is a warning. It tells us that something matters, that there is something worth protecting. You cannot break us with fear, because we have always known we would be afraid. We came anyway. The voice was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, there was something new in it. Something that sounded almost like confusion. "You are strange creatures." "Yes," Okonkwo said. "We are." They reached the access tunnel at midday. The entrance was a hole in the ground. A perfect circle of darkness that led down into the planet's depths. Cold air rose from it, carrying with it a smell that Okonkwo could not identify. Not decay, not dust. Something older. Something that had been waiting a very long time. "Lights on," she ordered. "Stay close. And remember, it will get worse down there. Much worse. But we have come this far. We will go the rest of the way." They descended. The tunnel was smooth, carved by technologies that humanity did not understand. It spiraled down through rock and metal and materials that had no names. The fear grew stronger with every step, pressing against their minds like a physical weight. Lieutenant Jin Park walked near the front of the column. He was 31 years old. His daughter had died 3 years ago, a car accident that had taken her when she was only 6. He still dreamed about her every night. He still heard her laughter in empty rooms. The fear found this memory and pulled. Suddenly, she was there, standing in the tunnel ahead of him. His daughter, his little girl, looking exactly as she had the last time he saw her. Before the accident. Before everything ended. "Daddy," she said. Her voice was just as he remembered. "Why did you let me die?" Park stopped walking. His heart was a stone in his chest. "You were supposed to protect me. You promised you would always be there. But you were not there. You let me die." "No." The word came out as a whisper. "No. I tried. I tried. To. You failed." She took a step closer. Her eyes were wrong now. "Too old. But you do not have to fail again. Stay here with me, Daddy. Stay with me forever. We can be together. You can make up for what you did." Park stared at the thing wearing his daughter's face. The tears on his cheeks were real. The pain in his heart was real. The fear was real. But so was something else. "My daughter would never want me to stop," he said. His voice cracked, but his feet started moving again. "She would want me to keep going. To help people. To do good." He walked straight through the vision, and it scattered like smoke. "She would be ashamed of me if I stopped here." He kept walking. The chamber, at the core of the planet, was vast beyond understanding. It stretched in all directions. A hollow space, carved from the world's heart, and at its center, floating in perfect stillness, was the source of all the fear, the dread. It was not a machine. Not really. It was something between a machine and a god, a weapon built by beings who had wanted to win a war so badly that they had created something that could not be stopped. It hung in the air like a wound in reality. Its shape was impossible to describe because it kept changing, flowing from one form to another. One moment, it was a tower of black crystal. The next, it was a mass of writhing shadows. The next, it was something that looked almost like a face, vast and terrible and filled with hatred for everything that lived. "You came," it said. The voice was no longer gentle. It was the voice of something that had killed billions, that had broken worlds, that had never known defeat. "I did not think you would make it this far. Sorry to disappoint," Okonkwo said. You are not disappointed. You are afraid. I can taste it. The fear of failure. The fear of death. The fear of being forgotten. The dread pulsed with dark light. But there is something else. Something I do not understand. Underneath the fear, there is something that should not be there. Yes. What is it? Okonkwo looked at her team. At the soldiers and scientists and engineers who had walked through hell to reach this moment. At Delgado, who was already moving toward the access point for the shutdown mechanism. At Park, whose face was streaked with tears, but whose hands were steady. Hope, she said. The dread laughed. It was a terrible sound. A sound that made the walls shake and the ground tremble. Hope is an illusion. A lie that the weak tell themselves to survive one more day. I have destroyed hope. I have crushed it in every mind I have ever touched. Your hope is nothing. Maybe. Okonkwo started walking toward the dread. But it is still here. After everything you have shown us, everything you have tried, it is still here. That tells me something. What does it tell you? That you are not as strong as you think. That fear is not the most powerful thing in the universe. She stopped a few meters from the weapon. You were built to break minds, but you have never met minds like ours. The dread's form shifted. For just a moment, something like uncertainty flickered across it. You cannot stop me. I am eternal. I am inevitable. I am a machine, Okonkwo said. A very old, very dangerous machine. But a machine can be turned off. Behind her, Delgado had reached the access point. Her hands moved across the controls, entering the shutdown sequence that Reyes had pieced together from the archives. The dread felt it. Its form convulsed. No, no, you cannot. I will not allow. It lashed out, a wave of fear so intense that it was like being hit by a physical blow. Okonkwo staggered. Around her, soldiers fell to their knees. Some screamed. Some went silent. The fear was overwhelming, crushing, absolute. Okonkwo felt herself dying. Not physically, her heart was still beating. Her lungs still breathing, but something inside her was being torn apart. Everything she was afraid of, everything she had ever feared, crashed into her at once. Death, failure, loss. The faces of everyone she had ever let down. The voices of everyone who had ever trusted her and been betrayed by that trust. She fell to her knees, but she did not close her eyes. I am human, she said. The words came out through gritted teeth. Blood ran from her nose. We have always walked beside our fear. We will walk beside it until we die. She pushed herself back to her feet. And we are not dying today. Delgado's fingers found the final key. The shutdown sequence activated, and the dread screamed. It was not a sound that could be heard with ears. It was a sound that was felt with the soul. 11,000 years of power, of terror, of absolute dominion over every mind it had ever touched. All of it came apart in a single moment. The fear stopped. For the first time in her life, for the first time in any of their lives, Okonkwo felt what it was like to stand in a place without fear. The weight lifted. The pressure eased. The whispers went silent. And where the dread had been, there was only emptiness. They stood in silence for a long moment. 100 humans, standing in the heart of a dead world, having done what no one in the galaxy had ever done. Then Park started to laugh. It was a broken laugh, half sob and half joy. We did it, he said. We actually did it. Okonkwo looked at her team. At the exhausted faces. At the tears and the blood and the shaking hands. At the people who had walked through fear itself and come out the other side. Yes, she said. We did. She activated her communicator. Okonkwo to perseverance. The dread has been neutralized. Vexaris 7 is clear. She paused, looking up at the stone ceiling above them, imagining the stars beyond it. The galaxy beyond that. The thousands of species waiting to learn what had happened. The silence is over. The return journey took 4 days. 4 days of quiet. 4 days without whispers, without visions, without the constant pressure of fear against every mind. The crews of the first expeditionary fleet spent those days in a kind of daze, not quite believing what they had done, not quite ready to face what came next. Admiral Okonkwo spent most of the journey in the medical bay. 847 people had not survived the mission. Some had died in the initial crossing, their hearts giving out under the strain. Some had died on the surface, their minds finally breaking under the weight of the dread's assault. Some had died in the final confrontation, in those terrible seconds when the weapon had lashed out with everything it had. She learned their names, every single one of them. She read their service records, their personal messages, their final words. She owed them that much. At least. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka found her there on the 3rd day, sitting beside the bed of a young ensign who had died in the tunnels beneath Vexorus. "You should rest," Tanaka said. "You have been awake for almost 30 hours. I have slept enough." Okonkwo did not look up. These people gave their lives for something most of the galaxy thought was impossible. "The least I can do is remember them." Tanaka sat down beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. "I keep waiting to wake up," Tanaka said finally. "I keep expecting to open my eyes and find out that we are still in the null zone. That none of this was real. I know the feeling. But it is real, is it not? We actually did it. We walked into the darkness, and we came back out." Okonkwo finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but something burned in them that had not been there before. "We did more than that. We proved that the darkness can be beaten. That fear is not the end of the story." She gestured at the room around them, at the beds filled with wounded survivors. 847 people died for that truth. "We cannot let their deaths mean nothing." "They will not," Tanaka said. "The galaxy will never forget what happened here." She was right. The fleet emerged from the null zone. No. Not the null zone anymore. Just empty space that had once been forbidden to find the largest gathering of ships in galactic history waiting for them. They came from every corner of the Dominion. Valkyrie transport ships with their copper hulls. Archon crystal vessels that blazed with inner light. Toreshi forest ships. Massive structures grown rather than built. Hundreds of species. Thousands of ships. Millions of souls. They had come to witness a miracle. Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and looked at the wall of ships surrounding them. She had expected a greeting party. Maybe a few dozen vessels. Not this. Not the entire Dominion. "Admiral." Liu's voice was thick with emotion. "They are hailing us. All of them. The communications board is overloaded. Put through the council channel." The screen filled with a familiar figure. Archon Vethkal stood in what looked like the chamber of the High Council, surrounded by the 12 oldest beings in the galaxy. "Admiral Okonkwo." The Archon's crystal form blazed brighter than Okonkwo had ever seen. "The Dominion welcomes you home." "Thank you, Archon." "I bring news." She took a breath. "The entity known as the Dread has been destroyed. Vexorus 7 is clear. The Great Silence is over." The silence that followed lasted only a moment. Then, across the fleet-wide channel, across every ship and station in the region, a sound began to build. Not cheering, exactly, not applause. Something deeper than that. A release of tension that had lasted 11,000 years. The Umbrax, the eldest of the counselors, spoke for the first time. Its voice of living shadow rippled across space. "Admiral, for 11 millennia, my people have mourned what was lost in that region. Friends, family, an entire civilization. We believed they would never be avenged. We believed the fear that killed them would last forever. I am sorry for what you lost," Okonkwo said. "We could not bring them back. All we could do was make sure no one else suffered the same fate. And that is more than enough. More than we ever dared to hope." The umbrax seemed to grow larger, darker, more present. Admiral Okonkwo, the Dominion High Council has deliberated. We have watched your species since you first joined us. We have seen your courage, your stubbornness, your refusal to surrender, even when all seemed lost. Today, you have proven what we only suspected. What is that? That humanity is not like us. You feel fear, as we do, perhaps even more strongly, but you have learned to walk beside it. You have made fear your companion instead of your master. This is a gift unlike any other in the galaxy. Okonkwo did not know what to say. She thought of the 847 who had not come home, of the nightmares that would haunt the survivors forever, of the cost that had been paid to reach this moment. It does not feel like a gift, she said quietly. The greatest gifts often do. The umbrax's voice softened. But it is a burden you do not have to carry alone. Admiral, the Dominion wishes to create a new order, a new role for humanity within our civilization. Not as rulers or conquerors, but as guides, as teachers, as the ones who walk first into the dark, so that others might follow. What kind of role? It was Archon Vethkal who answered. We call them the unflinching. They will be humanity's representatives across the galaxy. Not soldiers, though some will fight. Not diplomats, though some will negotiate. They will be something new, something the Dominion has never had before. And what is that? Hope, the Archon said. Living proof that fear can be overcome, that the darkness is not the end of the story. The weeks that followed were a blur of ceremonies, meetings, and more attention than Okonkwo had ever wanted. The Dominion threw celebrations that lasted for days. Species that had never shown emotion wept openly. Ancient grudges were set aside as civilizations that had avoided each other for millennia came together to witness the impossible. The survivors of the first expeditionary fleet were treated like heroes, and Okonkwo supposed they were, though the word felt too small for what they had done. The dead were honored too. Their names were carved into monuments on 1,000 worlds. Their stories were translated into 1,000 languages. The Dominion wanted to remember them, to make sure that their sacrifice was never forgotten. But for Okonkwo, the most important moment came quietly, without ceremony. She was on the Archon homeworld, attending yet another function, when a young Velkari approached her. The alien was small, barely reaching Okonkwo's chest, with the wide eyes and uncertain movements of a child. Admiral, the child said, my teacher said I should ask you something. Okonkwo knelt down so they were at eye level. Ask away. She said you went into the silence, into the place where everyone is afraid. I did. Were you not scared? Okonkwo thought about lying, about telling this child some story of courage and strength, of humans who felt no fear. But lies were not what this moment needed. Truth was, I was terrified, she said. Every moment of every day. I had nightmares that I cannot forget. I saw things that will haunt me for the rest of my life. The child's antennae drooped. Then, how did you keep going? Because I was not alone. Because I had people beside me who were just as scared as I was, and we carried each other through. She reached out and gently touched the child's shoulder, and because I knew that being afraid did not mean I had to stop. Fear is a feeling. It is real, and it is powerful, but it is not a wall. It is a door. You can walk through it. But what if I cannot? What if I freeze like my people always do? Okonkwo smiled. Then you try again, and again, and again. That is what humans do. We fail, and we get up, and we try again. And eventually, we learn that fear is not our master. It is our teacher. The child looked at her for a long moment. Then, something changed in those wide eyes. Something that looked like hope. Can you teach me? The child asked. Can you teach me to be unflinching? I can try, Okonkwo said. But I think you might already be braver than you know. The years that followed changed everything. Humanity did not become rulers of the Dominion. They did not seek power or influence or control. They became something else. Something stranger. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. They became guides, human volunteers spread across the Dominion, serving on ships and stations, in schools and hospitals, in governments and militaries. They did not take over. They did not lead. They walked beside, and they taught. They taught the Velkari that freezing was not the only response to danger. They taught the Toreshi that their slow, careful nature was a strength, not a weakness. They taught the Archons that even crystal beings could learn to bend without breaking, and slowly, one mind at a time, one species at a time, the galaxy began to change. The null zones did not disappear. There were hundreds of them scattered across the galaxy, each one hiding its own horrors, its own ancient weapons, its own dreads. But they were no longer forbidden. They were no longer untouchable. They were challenges to be faced, problems to be solved. Human teams led expeditions into zone after zone. Not alone, the Dominion species came with them, learning to walk through their fear, but always at the front. Always first, into the dark. They did not always succeed. Some zones were too strong, too deeply rooted, too filled with horrors that even humans could not face. But they kept trying. They always kept trying. Captain Yuki Tanaka, now Admiral Tanaka, led the expedition into the Crimson Wound, a null zone that had swallowed 3 empires. She came out with 2/3 of her fleet and the knowledge that the zone could be cleared. It took 3 more expeditions. But they did it. Captain Marcus Webb, old and gray and refusing to retire, discovered that some null zones were not weapons at all. They were wounds in space-time. Scars left by wars fought before the galaxy was young. He developed techniques for healing those wounds. By the time he died, at the age of 94, he had closed 7 zones and saved billions of lives. And Sergeant Rosa Delgado, the woman who had shut down the dread with her own hands, became something unexpected. She became a teacher, not of soldiers or scientists, but of children. Dominion children who had grown up believing that fear was the end of everything. She taught them that it was not. 20 years after the Great Silence ended, a ceremony was held on Vexorus 7. The planet was alive again. Not with the civilization that had once stood there that was gone forever, but with new life, new cities, new people. Species from across the Dominion had come to rebuild, to reclaim, to prove that even the deepest darkness could be overcome. Yuki Tanaka stood at the center of the ceremony. She was old now, her hair white, her face lined with the weight of everything she had seen, but her eyes were still sharp, still filled with that fire that had carried her through the null zone all those years ago. Beside her stood a young Velkari, Sithrix's grandchild, born after the Great Silence, raised in a galaxy that no longer believed fear was absolute. Admiral Tanaka, the child said, I have been taught about what your people did, about how you walked into the silence when no one else would. But I do not understand something. What do you not understand? My teachers say that humans are not braver than other species. They say you feel fear, just like we do. Maybe even more strongly. So, how did you do it? How did you keep going when everything told you to stop? Tanaka looked out at the crowd gathered for the ceremony. Humans, and Velkari, and Archons, and Toreshi, and 100 other species, all standing together on a world that had been lost for 11,000 years. We are not braver than you, she said. We are just used to being afraid. We have had practice. And practice? Millions of years of it. Our ancestors lived in a world of predators. They were hunted, every day, by creatures that wanted to eat them, and they survived. Not by being unafraid, but by learning to act despite the fear. She smiled. We carry that with us. Every human being throughout our entire history has been a descendant of someone who felt fear and kept going anyway. The child's antennae twitched. Then how do we learn? How do we get practice? A. Cries. To God. Tanaka knelt down, just as Okonkwo had done all those years ago with another Velkari child. You start small, she said. You find something that scares you, and you take one step toward it. Just one step. And then, another. And another. And eventually, you realize that the fear is still there, but you are still moving. That is all courage is. Not the absence of fear. Just the decision that something else matters more. What matters more? Tanaka stood and looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere, beyond the stars, the dominion stretched across the galaxy. Thousands of species, millions of worlds, countless lives that had spent eons hiding from the darkness. They were not hiding anymore. Everything, she said. Everyone. The people you love. The future you want to build. The knowledge that somewhere out there, someone is afraid, and they need someone to show them that fear is not the end. She looked back at the child. That is what it means to be unflinching. Not to feel no fear, but to walk through it. For the people beside you. For the people who will come after. For the galaxy that needs to know that darkness can be overcome. The ceremony ended as the sun set over Vexorus. The gathered crowds dispersed, returning to their ships and their homes, carrying with them the memory of what had happened and the hope of what might come. The planet hummed with new life, new purpose, new possibility. And across the galaxy, the star charts were updated. The null zones were no longer marked in red. They were marked in blue, the color humanity had chosen for themselves. The color of Earth's oceans, the color of the sky that their ancestors had looked up at and wondered. The label read, "Here walked the unflinching," and across the dominion, in schools and homes and ships and stations, a new generation was learning something that their parents and grandparents had never known. They were learning that fear was not the end of the story. They were learning that darkness could be overcome. They were learning to walk through their fear, one step at a time, toward a future that was brighter than anything they had ever imagined. And somewhere, on a quiet evening, on a rebuilt world, Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat with a young Velkari child and told her the story of how humanity had entered the Dominion and walked where fear could not reach. The child listened with wide eyes, and when the story was over, she asked, "Can I be unflinching too?" And Tanaka smiled. "You already are. You just do not know it yet." Above them, the stars burned bright. No longer cold, no longer distant, no longer symbols of fear and darkness and things that could not be faced. They were doorways now. Possibilities, invitations, and across the galaxy, one step at a time, the Dominion was learning to walk through them, together.
Morango ou branco? Passatempo, cara? Acho que não tem passatempo, não. Não tem, gente, passatempo. Tem hora com os dois recheios diferentes. Aí deixa eu ver o que mais que a gente precisa. É manteiga, cara. Só que manteiga eu acho que tem lá em casa. Aqui, ó. Falou aqui, ó. Margarina. Eu tenho a margarina lá em casa mesmo. A margarina é essa aqui, não é? É essa aqui mesmo. Eu tenho a margarina lá em casa. Então não preciso levar. Agora, vamos ver se tem filé mignon. Eu devia ter pego um carrinho, cara. Tá pesada essa bosta. Tem no açougue ali. 500 gramas de filé mignon. Fatiado, gente, que pede? Eu não sei como que pede. Isso, vai ser panqueca com filé mignon. Eu peço fatiado ou não? Eu até saio de perto aqui pro pessoal não me zoar. Como que pede? Pede eles a partido ou parto? Ou parto? Porra. Aqui tem salmão também, ó. Tem um filé de salmão também, mas acho que vou pedir filé mignon. Eu tô mais pra carne hoje. Gente, me ajuda, gente. Vou pedir filé mignon normal. 500 gramas de filé mignon. Nossa, eu vou passar vergonha. Tô até vendo. Oi, tudo bem? Tem filé mignon? De boi. Ah, ali no...
A terceira porta aí.
Embaixo. Tá bom, obrigado. É, filé mignon é só aqui, ó, que falou. 1, 2, 3. Não vai ser aqui, será? Aqui, ó, filé mignon. Mas eu não quero a peça inteira. Será que não tem um menor, não? Tô perguntando de qual carne. Tem na bandeja? É, mas eu não queria a peça inteira.
Ah, você não vai conseguir partir, não. Tem? Será?
Acho que não. Eu preciso lá no açougue, não tinha. Acho que não tem, não. Será que eu levo a peça inteira, gente? Não, a caseira é boa. Nossa, acho que eu vou ter que pegar um carrinho, cara. Gente, deixa eu pegar um carrinho, velho, porque... Vou pagar 80 contos na peça, mas tipo assim, o problema é que pra que eu vou pegar um quilo, cara, de filé mignon, uma peça inteira, tá ligado? É porque esse supermercado aqui é pra gente... Vai sobrar muito. Que carne que dá pra fazer assim de boi também? Deixa eu pegar o carrinho. Pronto, gente. É, ele é bonitão esse supermercado aqui. Opa, gente. Perdão. Perdão pra vocês. Fraldinha? Vamos voltar nas carnes. Vamos ver o que tem de... Vamos ver o que tem de pouca carne, tá ligado? Tipo assim, pra fazer na frigideira, fica bom qual? Alcatra fica bom na frigideira? Eu coloquei essa no carrinho, só ia demorar demais. Vamos ver. Carrapeta. Tem aqui, ó, fralda. Fralda. Maminha. Bife ancho. Contra filé é bom, não é? Gente, eu não sei explicar. Alcatra. Mas alcatra seria esse aqui? Não, bife ancho. Peraí. Cadê o cubo de alcatra? Coração da alcatra. Mas mesmo assim é a peça inteira, cara. Acho que a única que vai ter pouquinho vai ser essa fralda aqui, ó. Será que eu pego essa? Fralda? Tem diferença entre fralda e fraldinha? Não? Sim? Tem diferença entre fralda e fraldinha, gente? Porque se for a mesma coisa, eu acho que eu vou levar esse aqui. Ou será que eu só não levo alguma coisa de frango? E aí, Arne? Eu tô pedindo maminha. Cara, mas maminha eu nem gosto, porra. Tanto assim. Mas aqui. Tá quase o mesmo preço da peça inteira. Se fosse pra levar maminha, eu acho que eu levaria o filé mignon mesmo. Vou levar esse aqui, velho. Vamos tentar fazer essa bosta aqui. Como que escolhe isso, cara? Vou levar esse aqui.